Hello, so what we're going to be doing today is installing a VirtualBox machine. I'm going to start with actually installing VirtualBox. This can be downloaded from Firefox, or I mean not Firefox, but really any browser in specific that you have. You just have to go to virtualbox.org, go to the wiki/downloads page, and then pick your respective host. So like I used Windows, we just click on that and it'll come up and prompt us to download. Make sure you also grab the all supported platforms extension pack, so then this way that we can actually have, there's a bunch of these supports for USB 2.0, 3.0, and then some different other, additive things that are useful to help our operating systems run smoothly. Other than that, so we have the downloader here. We're gonna go ahead and double click that and just pop through the wizard here. And we can pretty much accept most of the defaults. Really, it's nothing too different. It's nothing like too critical, and you can always check through this if you want to. Otherwise, there are some network interfaces that are going to become installed. These interfaces are usually to help the host machine, so your outer machine here, work with the guest machine. That's going to be the one that you host in VirtualBox. And from that, you can send files, you can host servers on your guest machine or on your host machine, and both of them can interface with one another. This is useful if, say, you have file transfers which are, from, say, like if you're on Kali Linux and you stand up a web server so that you can transfer certain files from, say, like Kali Linux to your Windows machine, or if you want to host an FTP server between the two of them, you can have one on your host machine Windows, and you can access that FTP server with your guest machine on, say, Kali Linux or Ubuntu, and that's kind of nice actually, because in that way you don't need to worry about connecting drives or anything fancy. Currently, I'm going to go ahead and it'll prompt you to actually install the guest editions if you want. I already have it downloaded, but it may just download it, put it where it wants it, and then install it for you. Go ahead and hit upgrade, and you can just burn through that license agreement because nobody actually reads that, and then hit OK. I'll go ahead and delete the current file that I have there, and we're good to go. I currently have some virtual machines that are currently in my system because this was previously installed. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually import the Kali Linux distribution of VMware. And I have gotten these from, let's see, grab my downloads folder here. So drag this to the top. Moment, try that again. All right, so we have a folder right here, which is our Kali Linux OVA. The OVA is a virtual appliance. It's specifically going to be used for our VirtualBox. Now, this kind of file can be imported in VirtualBox or VMware, whichever hypervisor you want, but VMware uses VMDK files, so those might be a little bit more suited for VMware if you want. This kind of machine that we downloaded from the Offensive Security website can be found at offensivesecurity.com/Kali VMware VirtualBox image download, and it's a long ass thing, but I can go ahead and throw that link inside the comments for this video. But as you see here, you can have Kali Linux VMware images, VirtualBox images, and if you're cool, Hyper-V images. So from there, once we downloaded that, we can download that either with the mirror right here, which will download a zip file, or we can use a torrent. Personally, I like using the torrent because it tends to be quicker. If you kind of have the bad vibe of a torrent, it really isn't like you're torrenting, pirating software. You're using a peer-to-peer network to download a certain image, and in this case, we're downloading the VirtualBox image of Kali Linux. And you can use a really safe client called Deluge, which Deluge is really nice, really simple. It's not too complicated. Basically, it'll show the certain files that you're seeding. You can go ahead and open up. So if I download this torrent right here, I can go ahead and choose to open with Deluge. And Deluge will go ahead and prompt me to accept and add this torrent, and then it'll start downloading it. I'll go ahead and put a link for that also in the downloads. It's a really quick install. Anyway, so what we're gonna do is go ahead and import this OVA. It's really simple. This kind of is a similar concept whether you're in Mac, Linux, Windows. Of course, you're not gonna have all these here because you may or may not have had any other VMs currently on your system. Go ahead and go to File. We're gonna go ahead and import appliance, and we're gonna go from our local system. You can also look at, using Oracle services, look at their cloud infrastructure and pull one from there, but we're not doing that today. So we're going to go to our file, and we click this little button right here, and this is gonna pop up our file explorer, and we're gonna traverse to the Kali Linux VM. We can click right here in Windows and copy over our path. And then once we get to where we had downloaded or moved the Kali Linux box to, go ahead and click on it, hit open, and then click next. That's going to go ahead and import everything. First, it's going to prompt us to set up some parameters. Personally, if you have the hardware, depending on the specs of your machine, so if your laptop doesn't have, it's not really spec'd out, you may not want to adjust these settings. These are very low. They're low enough to where it'll still perform, but to where it doesn't entirely melt your computer, because sometimes it's kind of hard to, run a virtual machine within a computer which is very low spec. So say you only have 2 cores, well, this will run 2 cores, and you pretty much will not be able to use your host machine. You'll only really be able to use the virtual machine for the time being. Certain computers only have a certain amount of RAM, so this actually defaults at 2 gigabytes of RAM. It's not perfect because due to spacing, just how RAM works, so it's going to be a little bit over on that, but approximately 2 gigs of RAM. You don't have to do what I'm doing here. This is just for sake of my computer. I'm just going to pop it up to 8 gigs of RAM, and then we can leave most of these default if we want. I can go into more of these later if more requests come out for like the different features of VMware or VirtualBox. Otherwise, everything here is good. We're just gonna go ahead and hit import, and that should start importing the VirtualBox disk. I'll come back to that in just a second. Alright, so it looks like we have successfully installed our VirtualBox. You'll see it says Kali Rolling 2019. We also have specifically downloaded the 64-bit version. And then all of our stats are right here. So we first see our general tab, just tells us the name and then the operating system. Kali Linux is based off of the Debian 64-bit. So that's fine. We see we have 8 gigabytes of RAM, or 8,000 megabytes of RAM, and then 2 processors, or 2 cores of processor. And then just tells that our boot order is going to be from our hard disk and then our optical drive. Don't really need to worry about that. And then here's some interesting facts about our acceleration that we're using. And then of course it's going to go in and talk about our graphics, memory, and everything. We can actually usually bump up, if it's, sometimes it'll be like right here. Just bump that all the way up. So, and most of these should be fine. I wouldn't worry about futzing with these. The shared folders part, if you want to add folders, so say I have a folder path on my current directory, so say I want to put my Xilinx folder in there, I'll select the folder, and then I'll mount it to something like, temp, or some folder within Kali Linux, and it'll mount that, and it's a really good way to share folders between your host and your guest. Like I said, I can go into more of that later, but we scroll back down a little further, we see our description. This explains which Kali currently that we had downloaded, as well as the username, or the default username, the default password. Kind of a rule of thumb, usually when you install this is going to be the default username and password. So if you're on a network with a bunch of other people who may or may not know that you are running this on there, make sure you change the password. This usually isn't the case for Ubuntu or certain other VMs. Usually only Kali. I think actually they're changing that now, so they're gonna have a default. They might have a default user on there, but it's gonna be a non-root user. But this user that is currently on there is root. So we're going to make sure that we change that or add another user in there that's not root, and then have that as a different password too. And I can go into that, but currently, right now, this is just for installing and running Kali Linux. We're going to go ahead and hit start. And it's going to go ahead, open up, pretty little bootloader here. And we're going to go ahead and hit that. Let's see, what is our escape function? See, we can actually check. Forget which is actually our escape key. We can always figure that out later. So it brings up this page here. Like we said before, it's root and then tour, or also root backwards. And it brings up our lovely display here. Now, what is the benefit of doing this as opposed to using the ISO? The ISO you may notice from the Kali Linux download page. If we just go to the normal download page, which is feedback here, it'll give you the opportunity to download Kali Linux in a nice ISO format. So the benefit between doing our VM download that we did as opposed to doing our ISO download is this is already pretty much set up for the VirtualBox environment. And what I mean by that is that little file, the thing I was saying where you can mount the hard drive, already set up for that. Furthermore, if you wanted to do full screen mode, you can do, let's see, currently defined as right control. Okay, so you can do full screen, and it'll completely full screen the Kali system, which is really nice. This really is, I mean, it's better than using, you know, a little small 4x3. So, and as you've seen there, I actually have my default home key or the host key to control right control. So if I want to return back to not full screen, I do right control F, and that'll make it not full screen anymore. And it kind of leaves in this nice little setup. That's it for running Kali Linux on here. If you want to go ahead and shut it down, you can shut it down through this tab right here, hit shutdown, or you can do shut down now, and that'll go ahead and shut down the Kali box, and you are good to go.